Hello, welcome to Retracing History. I am your host, Isatu Bengal. Today's question is, what are the limits of political representation and participation as related to Black freedom? There are a lot of limits in terms of political representation when it comes to Black freedom. Let's talk about gatekeeping, which is when a political establishment has control over candidate selections and elections. Favored candidates are mostly familiar faces who uphold party interests and have easy access to money and personal resources. Personal wealth gaps can affect political representation because of the corrupting influence of inequality on democracy. With lack of campaign funding, the candidates usually don't win. For House seats, more than 90% of candidates who spend the most always tend to win. Particularly problematic is that many of the 1.2 million underrepresented African Americans live in communities which they should have a powerful voice in local government. One explanation for the shortage of African American candidates is the difficulty of being the first member of a demographic group to hold an office. Black candidates considering running for office may be worried of entering races in which they would be the first to break representational barriers. Council members' pay is often nominal, which limits the pool of potential council members to residents with enough time and resources to serve on the council for little compensation. Pay for a council member is about a couple of $100 per month. One factor that tends to make it more difficult for African American candidates to win elections and tends to discourage them is voter turnout. When talking about voter turnout, we refer to the strength of potential minority voter support. Off-cycle election scheduling and nonpartisan ballots have been linked to lower voter turnout. The electorate tends to get wider as its strengths, and strong minority voter support is often critical to the success of African American candidates. Descriptive representation can be especially valuable in cities, but it also promotes engagement more broadly. African Americans tend to be more engaged with the political process when they are descriptively represented. Political participation includes a broad range of activities through which people develop and express their opinions on the world and how it's governed and try to take part in and shape the decisions that affect their lives. There are many limits in terms of political participation when it comes to Black freedom. Disenfranchisement is the revocation of suffrage, the right to vote, of a person or a group of people or through practices. Black activist leaders and participants have risked life and limb in the decades-long struggle against discrimination, segregation, and voter suppression. On May of 1876, United States versus Reese said that the 15th Amendment states no right to vote, and as long as there is no announcement on the intention to discriminate, it was all okay. This box had 8 separate slots, each designated for a specific candidate or party. Whites were given assistance by poll workers, while blacks were left to try to figure out the system on their own. The elaborate literacy test required an applicant to read and interpret a section of the state constitution chosen by a local official. Whites were given simple clauses to read, while African Americans were given incomprehensible clauses which had been inserted into the document for that very purpose. In Giles v. Holmes, 1903, any law that was discriminatory would be a fraud, and the court would become party to that fraud by protecting the plaintiff's right as a citizen. In Shelby County versus Holder, 2013, it was deemed unconstitutional to to require 9 mostly southern states to seek federal approval before changing their election laws. In Houston versus A. Philip Randolph Institute 2018, it was ruled that states were permitted to throw eligible Americans off their voter rolls just because they decided to skip some elections. Modern-day poll taxes, such as fees unrelated to citizen sentences for individuals with prior felony convictions to vote, target black residents and present a barrier to voting. Frequent changes to polling sites make voters have trouble when voting, and unfortunately, many just give up. In Georgia, a voter registration application must be identical to information previously on file, or their registration is put on hold. Studies done by the NAACP in 2012 show that 25% of African Americans lack a government-issued ID, while for whites it is only 8%. The inability to fully participate in the democratic process translates into a lack of political power. Many black churches used to be very active in terms of registering voters, giving them voting education, and having buses take them to the polls to vote. Now, very few churches even do that. Groups like Rainbow Coalition and other black political organizations only come out to do voter education and registration during political elections. After that, they disappear from the community. Voters are not educated in how to deal with the elected representatives throughout their terms in office. In the school system, every time there is a budget problem, civic education programs get cut, so students don't get exposed to how the political system works. In the black community, the Democratic Party makes a lot of promises that they have never seemed to fulfill. The media are more interested in selling products and making money. Therefore, they focus more on sensational political news and do a poor job in educating the masses about the political process. A lot of organizations are interested in Yankee patriotism, so they discuss things that make people feel good about the country and shy away from critical things that force people to reevaluate their beliefs in the political system. Many young blacks not seeing people who look like them during major political discussions feel a disconnection from the system. A good example is the impeachment hearing. Lobby groups, which are only interested in their own particular issues, sometimes directly or indirectly undermine issues that are beneficial to African Americans. Since African Americans do not usually have the resources to hire and pay lobbyists on a long-term basis, their issues do not usually reach policymakers. Many African American lobby groups, such as Trans Africa, usually last for a particular issue and then disband after the issue is either addressed or ignored, so they have no continuity at all. Some black celebrities in Hollywood are more partisan towards the Democratic Party and give financial contributions only to those candidates, but not black Republican candidates, and when they win offices, the black celebrities have no access to them in order to push the black agenda. The most used American textbooks devote more than 95% of the discussion to white American history, particularly white males. The very small percentage that is left over is devoted to women, such as Susan B. Anthony, Native Americans such as Sacagawea, African Americans such as Martin Luther King Jr., and to Latinos such as Cesar Chavez. With this, the political struggles and strategies as minorities are marginalized and make it difficult for minorities to really deal with the political system effectively. Many black athletes who do not want to suffer the same fate as Kaepernick stay away from political activities in order to protect themselves. They learn from the few who join such political activists from the penalties they suffer, thereby preventing them to participate effectively in the political process. This is the end of this episode of Retracing History. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.